Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowances made for fair use for purpose such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statutes that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips in the balance of the favor of fair use. Furthermore, I give credit to the original copyright owner. I don't own the rights, or no infringement is intended to the material that has been added to this original content.
Sitting there fighting a battle that was over when I had to relocate. You see, I ain't much for letting go. No, baby, I gotta hold on. Cause trials, tribulations, and relationships have all made me strong. Oh, girl, I cry. These tears that I shed are the trail to bring you home. Oh, girl, I cry. Mama told me that a man's own tears can make him strong. Oh, girl, I cry. I'll sit around here and wait for you to come home. I'll cry for you. I'll cry. I'll cry.
Welcome to Blended Healing. This is episode 2 of Black History Legacy, or Black History Bite. Today it's going to be coming from The Conversation. It's an e-platform called econversation.com, and it was published by Susanna Ashton. Today we're going to talk about a Black fugitive who inspired a book and was also present for the end of United States slavery. Knowing your legacy and getting yourself informed allows all of us to be informed. In and around 1825, John Andrew Jackson was born enslaved on a plantation in South Carolina and trained to spend his life picking cotton. But instead of living a life as a slave, he escaped bondage and became an influential anti-slavery lecturer and writer. He also had a key role in the Harriet Beecher Stowe's celebrated novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which historians have argued helped trigger the Civil War by its depiction of the subhuman treatment afforded to Black men and women. As a scholar of the lives of the enslaved people and their writings, this has been researched and has been researched on the life of Jackson for many years and still remains a puzzle by his obscurity from most histories of slavery in America. In early 1846, Jackson's wife and daughter were sold to another South Carolina plantation. Heartbroken and furious, he was determined to earn money and buy his family's freedom. Jackson waited until Christmas Day and took a bold step. He escaped on horseback. He found work on the docks in Charleston and eventually hid between cotton bales aboard a boat heading to Boston. Once there, Jackson started speaking at abolitionist meetings across Massachusetts to raise money to free his wife and child. But before he could raise the necessary amount, President Fillmore signed into law the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which would impose harsh penalties on anyone who assisted runaways. Even though Jackson was living in a supposedly free state, he was in terrible danger of being returned to enslavement under the new law. Jackson decided to flee again, this time to Canada. Along the way, abolitionists directed Jackson to the sympathetic homes in Maine. On one such home belonged to the stuffy Thomas Upham, a professor of mental and moral philosophy at Bowdoin College. He had told his friends that while slavery was a grievous wrong, the Fugitive Slave Act was nonetheless the law and should be obeyed. But when Jackson knocked on his door, Upham immediately put aside his scruples. Upham invited him in and offered food and encouragement. Because of Upham couldn't put Jackson up for the night, he directed Jackson to his neighbor, Harriet Beecher Stowe, a friend who had long been frustrated with the otherwise kindly professor's timid politics. Stowe was a little known writer at the time, living as a faculty wife at Bowdoin College professor. When Jackson came to her threshold, she too broke the law. She opened the door and welcomed him in. Jackson entertained her children, told her of his heartbreak, and accepted money, food, and clothing from her before leaving the next morning. Although she never used Jackson's name, she later wrote of this incident, noting that her visitor was a genuine article from Old Carolina State, a reference to a popular minstrel song that Jackson was to later append to his own memoir. A few weeks later, Stowe began drafting Uncle Tom's Cabin. It had a familiar scene. The novel's heroine, Eliza, a black fugitive, knocks on the door of a U.S. senator who had previously promised to adhere to the fugitive slave laws. But when faced with a terrorized person at his doorstep, the senator allowed his heart to lead instead of his head. Like the real Professor Upham, the fictional senator and his wife defied the law. Art always rises from a myriad of influences and other individuals or experiences, certainly inspired by Stowe's writing. But aside from this scene, that clarity drew upon Upham's meeting with Jackson. This encounter took Stowe from the broader debate of anti slavery politics to the immediate of direct action. Published in 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin galvanized abolitionists across the country and became the second best-selling book in the United States during the 19th century. Only the Bible ranked higher. A decade later, when Stowe visited the White House in November of 1862, President Lincoln supposedly told her, "So you are the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." While Stowe was drafting her novel, Jackson was crossing the United States-Canada border. He moved from Maine and settled in St. John's, New Brunswick, for a few years. But his desire to have a broader influence in the anti slavery movement led him to sail off to Liverpool, England, with an endorsement letter from Stowe herself. Over the next decade, Jackson lectured across Britain, as many black abolitionists did, including Frederick Douglass. During this time, Jackson wrote his own 1862 memoir, The Experience of a Slave in South Carolina, in which he wrote of his encounter with Stowe. It's only until after the Civil War ended in 1865 that Jackson sailed back to the United States from Britain. He continued to lecture and raise money, this time for relief supplies to destitute freedmen in South Carolina. He collected money to start an orphan's home, a church, and a home for black elders without families to care for them. Few of these projects ever materialized fully, but newspapers and correspondence with government officials documents his relentless advocacy. Jackson's audacious life ended at some point in the very early 20th century. Before he died, his actions had become legend among the people who knew him in the black community. One of his neighbors remembered him with admiration. In the 1930s, an interviewer asked Jake McLeod, an elderly black sharecropper, about his memories of Jackson. Don't know how to come he run away, McLeod said, but they didn't catch up with him till it was too late. Thank you so much for tuning into this Black History Bite of Legacy. Continue the conversation at home as things are being blocked from our schools and learning facilities of some of the legacy and some of our history here. I want to thank you again for stopping by. Be well, stay safe. Ashe. Deep bow.
Sitting there fighting a battle that was over when I had to relocate. You see, I ain't much for letting go. No, baby, I gotta hold on. Cause trials, tribulations, and relationships have all made me strong. Oh, girl, I cry. These tears that I shed on the trail to bring you home. Oh, girl, I cry. Mama told me that a man's own tears can make him strong. Oh, girl, I cry. I'll sit around here and wait for you to come home. I'll cry for you. I'll cry.